Okay, okay, okay. Professor Wynn and ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, thank you very much for the invitation again to talk and to give you a lecture about a pharmacological aspect in cardiology. I was asked to take a lecture about the new drug therapies in heart failure. In the first slide, you will see here the consolidated international pharmacotherapy recommendations for heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. It's called HFrEF. And the standard therapy, you'll see the big fours, ARNI, AC inhibitors, receptor blockers, beta blocker, SGLT1, and inhibitors, and MRA. About the last one, SGLT, you will hear an next lecture in the next 2 hours. So I want to take the focus on the individualized therapies, loop diuretics, IV, iron, digoxin, ibrahim. So I cannot discuss all these kinds of drug treatments. And the success rate, in the relative risk reduction of different pharmacological treatment combinations for heart failure, you will see here. You see in the hospitalization for heart failure, the hazard ratio is reduced to 0.4. And for the all-cause death, for 4 big treatment points, you will see a reduction of hazard ratio to 0.74 or 0.72. MRA and SGLT inhibitors, reducing point is 0.81. So what is new? What is new? So I want to focus only on one of the individualized therapy. It means the ferric carboxymaltose and ferric deoxymaltose. What does it mean, the iron deficiency? You will see here an old investigation about the pooled analysis of 5 European studies. And the iron deficiency is defined to a ferritin level under 100 microgram per liter, or the ferritin 100 to 300 with a saturation of transferrin below 20%. And you will see about a follow-up of 1.92 years, there is an iron deficiency independent predictor of mortality. You see, and that is statistically significant. So what does it mean now in these days? 2022, this publication of Ironman, ferric deoxymaltose in patients with heart failure, in an ejection fraction of 32 or 35% in over 1,000. And you see here in all 4 kinds of efficacy points, only in a combined endpoint of admission for heart failure or stroke or MI or cardiovascular death, there is a small statistic significance between ferric deoxymaltose and placebo. The next clinical trial you will see is what published 2023. You see in an ejection fraction of 40%, you don't see any real difference between placebo and the ferric carboxymaltose. And it was investigated in over 3,000 patients. So, The next analysis was a meta-analysis, and it was a composite of recurrent hospitalization for heart failure or cardiovascular death. It was a meta-analysis of 10 randomized clinical trials, including AFFIRM and Ironman, which I have shown you, over 3,000 patients with heart failure, and independent of the EF. It was a reduced, middle reduced, or preserved. And if you take these 10 randomized clinical trials, you will see a reduction of a rate ratio of 0.75. I mean that a reduction of clinical complication in recurrent hospitalization for heart failure or cardiovascular death of 25%. This is true only for patients with a transferrin saturation under or below 20%. Over 20%, this kind is not statistically significant. So, what do we learn about this? We learned the recommendation in the ESC guidelines, 21, and the difference to 23. Intravenous iron supplementation is recommended in symptomatic patients of HFrEF or FMREF and iron deficiency to alleviate symptoms and improve quality of life. This is a class A1, and the intravenous iron supplementation with ferric, whatever you want to do it, should be considered in symptomatic patients with HFrEF or FMREF and iron deficiency. And why? Only to reduce risk of heart failure hospitalization. That is, it was investigated, it was proved. Coming to the guidelines for the treatment of patients with symptomatic heart failure and the differentiation between MREF and HFpEF. And you see here, that's the most, you see here, the new drug therapy, it was in the MRF, it was with phenylalanine in the last 4 weeks, and in the management of HFpEF, you have seen a new one as a semaglutide, that's a glucagon-like peptide receptor agonist, also the dual GLP-1 and glucose-dependent insulinotropic peptide, CHIP-RA. What does it mean? You know the GLP-1 or GLP and diabetes mellitus. The GLP-1 was detected and developed for the treatment of diabetes mellitus. And you see here, what is this? Okay, you see here the incretins, GLP-1 or GAP, they stimulate the insulin release and they inhibit the glucagon release. And therefore they are lowering the blood glucose. They have multiple effects, enhancing insulin secretion, slowing down stomach emptying, promoting satiety, or improving disposal in peripheral tissues. So they are now under the scientific investigation, multiple clinical trials with these kinds of drugs. And you see here, that's 12 different clinical trials. It's seeming the drug is in preparation for a panacea. I hope so. It is not, but it is very interesting to see it here in the literature. What do they do? The semaglutide in HFpEF and obesity. It's not true for Vietnam. I didn't see any obese people, or not too much obese people, in opposite to Europe or to America or United States. But the semaglutide in patients with HFpEF and obesity, that's a really, no, excuse me? Okay. You see, that's a difference from 7.8 points, and they are doing really change the body weight. Yeah, that is also true for semaglutide in patients with obesity and type 2 diabetes, also efficacies. You see, for tirzepatide in heart failure with preserved ejection fraction and obesity, the composite of deaths from cardiovascular causes or a worsening heart failure event is really different between placebo and tirzepatide. The combined endpoints in patients with HFpEF after SC application, you will see here, you need only one dose per week, 2.5 milligram per week, or up to 15 milligrams in tirzepatide. And the dual primary endpoints, cardiovascular deaths for tirzepatide, is 0.62. That's very good, but not for the deaths from cardiovascular cause. The change in Kansas City cardiomyopathy clinical sum score is different, and also the change in body weight. That's a decrease within 1 year of 10 or 6% or 10% after weekly application of these drugs. Also the function capacity of the heart is better, and the CRP, high sensitive CRP, is reduced. What is the reportable adverse events during the treatment period in all 3 clinical trials? You see here the the adverse events was pronounced in the placebo group and not in semaglutide. In the tirzepatide, you will see here gastrointestinal side effects are more pronounced compared to placebo. That's a really good side effect efficiency. So we can conclude in patients with HFpEF and obesity, as well as in type 2 diabetes, only once weekly semaglutide led to fewer heart failure-related symptoms and physical limitations and greater weight loss than placebo. Whether the observed effects of semaglutide would last beyond 1 year is unknown, and treatment with tirzepatide led over a median of 2 years to a slower risk of composite of death and cardiovascular causes, not for the death alone. Coming to the last drug therapy, the mineralocorticosteroid receptor antagonist. You know here about spironolactone since 30 years, eplerenone and finerenone. The new one is finerenone. Yeah? And pharmacodynamic and kinetic differences of steroid MRAs and finerenone you will see here. And most important, the priest-related side effects of finerenone compared to spironolactone is most evident. MRAs in heart failure in clinical trials, you all know the rails, emphasis HF, top cap, or fine arts HF, the last one. And you see here the clinical effect is a reduction, a risk reduction in survival of spironolactone, also for eplerenone and in this kind. And what is about the finerenone in heart failure? With mild reduced preserved ejection fraction, you will see in all kinds, the total worsening of heart failure events and deaths from cardiovascular causes, or in total worsening of heart failure. There is a big difference between placebo and finerenone. And what about the safety in fine arts EHF trial? Any serious event is not pronounced between finerenone and placebo. The creatinine, Michael Fischer-Eter will talk about this point, I think. And the serum potassium, okay, you have a difference between finerenone and placebo, 14.3% and 6.9%. But leading to hospitalization, that's a small difference. And leading to death is no difference between these drugs, between the drug and placebo. So, we can, okay, you have to stop and have to conclude from fine arts HF among patients with heart failure and mildly reduce or preserve ejection fraction finerenone rapidly and durable, reduce cardiovascular effects in events, but not for death from cardiovascular causes. These findings were consistent across pre-specified subgroups, including across ejection fraction and those on SGLT inhibitors we will hear about in the next few minutes. Hyperkalemia was more common and hypokalemia less common in those receiving finerenone. And the trial results are likely to change the rather weak guidelines recommendations for those use of MRIs in patients with chronic heart failure and an EF of 40% or greater. Thank you very much.